take it away.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll call this meeting to order and ask you to join in the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening as we get together to work and learn and help set the direction for our community. Give us wisdom and help us to hear and listen to each other. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
So this is item C, this is approval of the agenda, and I will say that none of the items we have today actually require a motion, a second, or any binding action, with the exception of approval of the agenda. So perhaps as a form of solidarity, if either planning commission can make a motion with the council seconding that motion to approve the agenda, if everyone's in agreement, then we would like to see that, or vice versa.
Go ahead.
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion
Very
carries.
good.
Unanimous.
I will say, I should have said one more thing. I think that we have a last minute addition of I-1. That's not on the agenda, but we do have a guest speaker here, so I will ask that perhaps we add that I-1 to the agenda. So perhaps.
It's on there. It's on.
Perfect, good, then no issue there.
We're good.
All right. So this is item I-1. We do have a guest speaker, so I do want to invite up to the mic. Very good. So introduce yourself.
So much. Good evening. Is this on? Okay. Good evening, Council and Planning Commission. It's a pleasure to be joining you here tonight. My name is Gentry Thiessen. I'm Government Affairs Director with the Realtors of South Central Kansas, and I received the invitation on Monday to come and join you tonight. So I'm really grateful that my schedule allowed and I had the opportunity to speak to you here. Who I am, how I got into this work. So when I was growing up, my mom was the mayor in Newton, Kansas, and that really shaped my experience in what I wanted to do with my own profession. When I was in college, I majored in political science and anthropology. I spent some time in the legislature working during a legislative session, and when I graduated, I worked for the city of Wichita in the Parks Department. So public service is deeply ingrained in what I care about, what I believe, and how I believe we need to serve our communities. So naturally, after the pandemic, I decided that I was done with public service, and I went to the dark side, which was lobbying, which is why I'm here before you today. It's not all doom and gloom as a lobbyist, because it means that I get to stand in front of incredible groups like you and talk to you about what we need to do to address the housing crisis in our communities. I feel deeply called to do this work, and I'm really grateful again for the opportunity to be here. So a little bit about the purpose of the presentation I'll be giving you tonight is to explain why housing is a critical issue in Sedgwick County and Goddard, and the role of local policy in addressing these challenges. I think we all understand, especially this group here, that state and federal government do not have the silver bullet to solve all of our problems. If they did, we probably wouldn't even need to be sitting here tonight. And why is this critical for us? So in Sedgwick County, we do not have sky-high prices. Our affordability is among the best in the country, but that doesn't give us any right to rest on our laurels, because we are still, in fact, facing record numbers of people experiencing homelessness, seniors and low-income families being priced out and taxed out of their homes, and the county predicts that we are 35 to 50,000 units short. And I will get to this number here of kind of where we've landed on how we got to 35 to 50,000 units, provide a little bit of context as far as what I know, and then maybe we can dive in further if we have further questions about that. So, a little bit of overview here of who I work for, the Realtors of South Central Kansas. We are a trade association that is a local affiliate of the National Association of Realtors. We are the largest trade association not only in the nation but also in the state, and the Realtors of South Central Kansas, representing 17 counties, has 2,500 members. We represent residential and commercial realtors, brokers, salespeople, property managers, appraisers, business partners, and others that are engaged in the real estate industry. And we provide members with valued resources, advocate for the industry and the communities we serve, and protect private property rights. We are set up like a chamber of commerce, and that may be a concept that is really familiar to you all. So we are the Chamber of Commerce, but for the realtors. Since 2015, RSCK has joined efforts with 5 other realtor boards in Kansas, resulting in our 17 counties that we now encompass. This collective regional effort includes the border all the way from Nebraska down to Oklahoma, so we do cover quite a big geography, and I don't think our name is probably very accurate anymore, but that's who we are, and we're sticking with it. We have one subsidiary of our association, and that is the South Central Kansas Multiple Listing Service, the MLS. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Realtors of South Central Kansas. And a little bit of information here about what is the economic impact of what realtors and other people in real estate, what is it that we are contributing to the community? And it's $3.08 billion in transactions. So last year alone, the MLS helped facilitate over 12,000 transactions, totaling over $3 billion. So we contribute a lot to the economy, and the work that we do is really important. So there's some key data points on what is going on in Sedgwick County here. We publish these market stats every single month, so if you feel that you get to August or you get to September, October, November, and you want these updated statistics, we do have those, and we would love to provide them to you because we think that it's really important that our community is given the most relevant and up-to-date information. So a little bit of what you're seeing here. I'm going to cover this fast and sparingly, so if we need to come back to these numbers, I can. Total active listings on the market for Sedgwick County was 1,504. Our supply here, we're looking at 2.5 months of supply, specifically noting that this number is up 25% year over year. We calculate the months of supply by dividing the total number of homes for sale over the number of homes sold in one single month. $209 million in sales volume last month. Median sales price is up to $270,000, and that's up 7.1% from last year. Median days on the market, 9 days. So this is up last year from this time nearly 50%. According to national data, the typical home sold on the market is on there for 3 weeks, so things are moving really fast here in South Central Kansas. In summary, the market is less tight than it was a year ago, but still difficult for many. Some of the driving factors on that would be limited inventory. Housing economists typically advise that a balanced market is 5 to 6 months of supply. So despite active listings being up from a year ago, supply is still in trouble. High interest rates, particularly what we see compared to 2020 and 2021, those may be dropping, but people aren't incentivized to move because they're married to a really good rate. And what I've got for you here is some market data that is really specific to Goddard. A resource that we have in front of you all here are RPR reports, Realtor Property Resource Reports. These include really insightful data for your city, such as housing stats, statistics on your population, as well as economic data. So compared to Sedgwick County in the state, median home value is greater in Goddard at $292,000. The median age of a home is lower, 23 years. And you've got an 80-20 owner-renter split. It's important to note here that there are limitations to the data. What story is not being told about our renting population? I'm not so sure, because that is not information that we have in our multiple listing service. So the market trends for Goddard are going to be different than the county or any other municipality in our county or elsewhere in the state. So now might be a good time to address this unit shortage. I reported 30 to 50,000 units short at the beginning of my presentation. In 2017, it was in a community needs assessment from the United Way that within the county, over 21,000 housing units were sitting vacant. Just a couple months ago, the Wichita Journalism Collaborative did a deep dive on 20 years of permitting data from NABCD and reported that Wichita is missing 17,000 single-family homes if it had been able to match a pre-recession pace of building. And then just earlier this year, WSU's Public Policy and Management Center reported a 10,000 unit shortage alone for low-income renters. There's a lot of variability in these numbers and what they're actually reporting on, and that 30 to 50,000 unit is a massive range, but all of this data is pointing to a couple truths that I think we can understand. That there's market misalignment. So the most burdened in finding housing that matches their needs in the price range are actually at the very lower and the upper ends of the spectrum. Very low-income renters face deficiencies in affordable units, while high-income households, particularly owners, encounter a lack of housing priced for their income level, causing them to occupy housing that cannot be accessed by a more appropriate income range. I'm sure you've heard it before that we are missing housing in the middle, and reports show that that housing is actually there, and what we may be missing is housing on the upper income range. So people who may be well suited to move into a higher income housing, it just doesn't exist there, so they stay occupying what's in the middle, making it really hard for other people to move into a more appropriate range. Our data also does not reflect the very real and very large contingent of adults that under the right conditions could form their own households. So 5,800 adults living with non-relative adults are priced out from starting their own households. And then quality and affordability challenges are really big. Single person and 4+ person households face the greatest quality and affordability challenges. Focus group observations indicate that young professionals are a group that face significant barriers. And in the report for Goddard, you'll see that 34% of adults range in ages from 18 to 35. So if we're going to connect that piece to the fact there are plenty of adults that would like to form their own households but are priced out of that, then you'll see that over 1/3 of your population is likely cost burdened in both renting and home ownership. So these reports are generated from a compilation of sources including listing data, public records, market conditions and forecasts, census and employment data, demographics and trends data, business data, school data and reviews, and specialty data sets. And again, I would offer to you that anytime you need an updated report, shoot me an email and I'd love to get that to you. So with all of that data in mind, these are anecdotally some of the challenges that we've identified in our region, and some of these challenges are also faced in all areas of the country and that we are not really that unique. Being low inventory and high demand, so as mentioned, our 2.5 months supply is not enough for a balanced market. Demand for housing types that are not as prevalent as they need to be for our market, including first-time buyers that cannot get something in their price range. We don't have nearly enough of what they are identifying they want, which is single family in a 150 to 200 range. There is also some challenge in managing expectations with buyers about what exists in our market and what they can reasonably afford. That is probably a hard conversation that often has to be had with real estate agents and the clients, which is, here's what you can reasonably afford, and you need to manage the expectation of what you'll get into. There's also affordability concerns, so it's not just the principal and interest that owners need to consider when making budgets. It's property taxes, it's insurance, all of these things that factor into your mortgage payment. Even if owners own the home outright, we've still got rising taxes and insurance being the #1 grievances in this market that I've heard. And then barriers to new construction, so what prevents us from building the housing that we need? And it may not be as relevant here in Goddard because it sounds like you guys have a lot going on, but it would be the price of red tape. So permits, fees, inflation, the supply chain, all of those costs incurred by the developer that is then passed on to a buyer or a renter. Land availability, you may be constrained in what you can really hope to achieve because you have to deal with cities encroaching around you. Zoning may make it hard to build the type of housing that we need, and cost margins for infill development specifically make it really difficult. So let's say that you've got 100 vacant lots that the developer wants to build on in the city center, that's great. They could tackle supply challenges if they could build more dense multifamily on the lots, but because the neighborhood's against it, they don't end up developing there. They can build 100 single family lots more easily on acres in the suburb than they can on sporadic lots in the city center. So, I've got a couple policy solutions and resources for you here, and not every single one is going to work for you, and honestly not every single one is meant to. If you're going to glean anything out of all the information presented today, it's that your city has unique challenges and opportunities in this market. County-wide solutions may not work for you, but I want to help you find the policy solutions that work here in Goddard. The association is meant to be a resource to you, and I hope you take advantage of that. So what you might try is updating your zoning ordinances to allow for more density and abolishing parking minimums. All of this hinges upon getting your constituents to be YIMBYs instead of NIMBYs, so you need people that are going to say, yes, I need more housing in my community. Yes, I need more housing and I will allow it in my backyard. Probably going to have to diversify your housing types. So missing middle housing, referring to the lack of medium density housing, may include things like duplexes, which you all are very familiar with, but it also looks like fourplexes, cottage courts, multiplexes, and all of these house-scale buildings fit into existing residential neighborhoods that support walkability, retail, and public transportation options. You need both attainable and affordable housing. So attainable being market rate housing that, based on medium area income, most households can afford, and then affordable housing being, in a lot of cases, government subsidized. So housing choice vouchers, Section 8, it will not be enough to do one or the other. We will have to do both. And then utilizing incentives. So with demand outpacing supply, cities can strategically offer incentives to stimulate private investment. And that might include tax abatements and exemptions, tax increment financing offered to room and ADU conversions directly to owners, expediting the permits of zoning adjustments, density bonuses, all of that among many, many options. And I think what we find is that what gets incentivized is what gets built. So what you are choosing to incentivize is what you are allowing to happen in your community. And then we also encourage you to take advantage of community partnerships. So discuss opportunities for public-private partnerships and collaborations with community organizations. We find that the Public Policy and Management Center out of WSU has committed a lot of effort to see what the overall housing need is. And then RSCK and the MLS are a resource to you. I have to keep saying that I will, but take advantage of what we have to because we want to be good partners in this work. So I've got a couple case studies here that I want you to consider. And again, I'm not saying this is going to work for you, but I'm saying that maybe we need to consider and expand what our opinion is of what housing can be possible. So in Spokane, Washington, in August of 2022, the city of around 200,000 people in Washington state adopted an interim zoning measure as a trial. So the Building Opportunity and Choices for All Act was implemented for a year, just a single year, temporarily abolishing single-family zoning and allowing the construction of up to fourplexes citywide. At a high level, Spokane has been effective at building housing over the past year. So within a year, the data showed that more than 455 missing middle housing units were in permitting and 76 had already been approved. Another option that you have available to you is that neighborhoods perceived to be stagnant or declining are usually not targets for reinvestment, large or small, and that confidence in hyper-local neighborhood investment is something that needs to increase. We can look to Oswego, New York for this. So we found that the Oswego Renaissance Association, a neighborhood community association, provided modest matching grants to homeowners who were prepared to improve their property. However, the difference here is that those improvements must be visible from the street and that no individual can apply on their own. Applications are only accepted when they come from groups of at least 5 homeowners on a block. And the benefit to this is that the whole block transforms at once, increasing confidence in the neighborhood and probably also increasing property values. So in the 9 years since the organization was founded, they've awarded over $560,000 in grants, and that money was leveraged to over $5.1 million in private investment in neighborhoods. So this not only builds the capacity of people in their neighborhoods and magnifies their investments, but it also leads to incremental investments of their neighbors. And then the final case study that I'll present to you here is the Prairie Queen housing development in the city of Papillion, Nebraska. It's a really wonderful example of what missing middle housing could look like in a whole neighborhood format. So in 2016, a private developer in Omaha had a vision to recreate the neighborhood with the feel of a classic community. It was a $100 million project that was greenlit in 2018 with construction beginning the same year. The missing middle housing neighborhood sits on 50 acres in Papillion and will ultimately feature about 500 units, including large and small duplexes, 3plexes, 4plexes, 6plexes, apartments, townhomes, and retail spaces, along with other recreational amenities and connections. So what was key to this project was their use of the missing middle housing neighborhood kit system, which presents a suite of simple unit plans that can be deployed across sites to create buildings with character and vibrant neighborhoods of missing middle housing. So as a part of the system, in order to create efficiencies, cost savings, and deliver projects at attainable price points, 6 unit plans are standardized with the intention that the unit plans can be assembled intelligently into a variety of building types, which in turn can be placed together to create neighborhoods with a lot of variety and character, something that I think we hear from our neighbors they really value. So, how can cities lead? This is the final slide that I'll leave you with tonight. Again, RCK has access to resources that we would be thrilled to deploy on behalf of your city. You have access to fair housing grants, rural outreach grants, placemaking grants, land use studies and analysis, local polling on growth-related issues, and so much more. Be a partner to my association so we can find the resources that will help you grow and build in a way that works for you. And then, this is my shameless plug here, consider appointing realtors to your planning and zoning commissions and other boards. These are going to be some of your most involved and active members in your community because they live in the communities where they work, they know the landscape of our local and regional economy, and they know their neighbors and communities. They understand the mill levy, which may be hard to come across with every other citizen. There's a lot of value in continued dialogue between the association, city officials, and partners in the real estate industry. So that's what I have for you tonight. I'd be happy to answer questions if I can manage, and if not, let me find the answer for you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Ginger, thank you. Had the opportunity to listen to some of this a couple weeks ago. Continue to learn more each time I hear, so appreciate not only your time, but also kind of finding out that there's some additional resources and things that we can consider going forward as we kind of grapple with what everybody else is dealing with. I saw a little deal from my hometown, and the council, people that are running for city council in Manhattan, Kansas, had just a whole discussion on this same topic. So I don't think it's anything that is unique to what we're facing. I think it's something that's happening across the country. So, I just, questions? Any questions in terms of the things that were presented? You guys all pretty shy and quiet tonight.
Yeah, I had a question. So I hear the terms like affordable housing and then the term middle housing.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between affordable housing and middle housing?
Sure. Let me break it down for you the best that I know how. So we've got affordable housing and we've got attainable housing. Attainable housing would be market rate housing, not subsidized in any way, but something that 80 to 120% of your area median income households would be able to afford. Affordable housing is what gets subsidized by the government. It's maybe even what we would consider we incentivize to build. And we often think of it as Section 8 housing, vouchers, that kind of thing. Missing middle housing refers to a density of housing that is not single family, and it's not big multi-family complexes, 100+ units, but it's a range of housing types in the middle of those things. It may look like duplexes, it may look like fourplexes, courthouse homes, cottage courts, townhomes. It refers to a variety of housing types in the middle that will meet greater density needs of your community so you can build more affordably, bypass a lot of the issues associated with infrastructure costs. It's something that a lot of planning organizations and a lot of cities are moving towards, is building more houses that allow for higher density so you don't have to incur as many costs that get lost in special assessments and that kind of thing.
Have you seen any places or other communities that are working to try to deal with the issues around first-time home buyers? I know I saw a statistic here last week that back in the 70s, people at the age of 25, about 40% of them were married, had a job, had children, had a mortgage. That same statistical parameters today, it was like 22 or 23%. So the economics that none of us have probably much control over are, I think, down payment related, just the gap in income from starting jobs and a lot of other things associated with that. I mean, are there some practical things that we should be considering to deal with that?
So the average age of a first-time home buyer across the nation today is, I think, 36 years old. A far cry from what we would find in the 70s and the 80s and how a lot of young people could enter home ownership for the first time. And I cited a statistic here that there are 5,800 adults that are living with other non-relative adults that simply cannot go and establish their own household because of income limitations, because of limitations on what sort of housing supply and stock is available to them, including factors of what's affordable and what they can actually manage on an income. And I've heard it said before that we don't necessarily have an affordable housing problem, but we have a wage problem in South Central Kansas. And I think to some extent that is true. And it's probably just about as hard to solve as it is building the housing that we need. Because if business X goes and increases their minimum wage $15 an hour, what's that gonna do to business Y? I don't have any solid answers for you or even examples to cite at this time of what other communities are doing really well. I would caution that if we hear policies about the federal government is going to offer every single first-time home buyer $40,000 for a down payment, that may just lead to the unintentional outcome of increasing every single housing unit by $40,000, putting it further out of reach. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you there, and I just kind of talked around it for 2 minutes.
Appreciate the honesty.
Sure.
Other thoughts, comments?
I was surprised a lot of the stuff you're saying sounds like the same stuff we hear from Micah at a lot of the city planning or the planning commission meetings.
I would say that it's because these ideas are shared by a lot of people, ranging from planning departments, community developers, community planners, and then people like me that get paid to come and tell you something. And for the record, I am not being paid tonight. I'm doing this as a service to you all because I believe in what the Realtors Association does, and I believe that a part of that work that we do is coming and sharing information with you all. Yeah, there's a lot of widespread adoption of these ideas that density is really what is needed. And I would say a huge barrier to that is political will. And I'm not here to bully you into doing any particular thing, but simply to present to you what a lot of people are agreeing is maybe one part of the solution to this problem.
So, do I understand that the housing that we're missing then, I wrote down a lot of stuff and I just want to make sure I'm wrapping around it. The housing that we're missing is housing that would cost $150,000 to $200,000. That's what we're missing. But I think even if we build duplexes, like they're selling for way above that.
What we hear from buyers that are trying to enter the market for the first time, and I couldn't point to a particular study that I'm saying this is how many people need it in this range, but what we're hearing from a lot of people that are first-time home buyers and entering the market for the first time is, I want something in that 150 to 200 range. That is what they're getting pre-approved for. That is what they've come to hope for and expect, but that is not the reality of what can actually be built and sold. Because ultimately, you want developers in your community, and they are not government, and they are not nonprofits, and they are seeking to make a profit, and I don't think that there is anything wrong with that. But there needs to be some level of expectations managed with buyers about what they can actually afford and what actually exists on the market.
So the banker's fault.
Always.
So what happens, in your opinion, if we build, a whole bunch of houses that are 325 to 400 or 300 to 325? Who's renting those are you talking about? So then what happens is the people that could probably afford more are renting those, and we're still leaving the people out that really is the largest community of people that need it. And so do they not sell or not rent?
People in that 300 to 400,000 range?
If there's not a need for that level of housing, because what I hear you saying, I could be wrong, so, is that the people need is at the 150 to 200 or well above that. But we continue to build right in the middle. So who buying, what's the thought process there, I guess?
I think we would hope that best case scenario here, if we cannot find developers to build in that range, and maybe it's because they do not exist, which I am not a developer myself, I don't work with developers, and I think that if they could profitably build those units, they would. But I think that we find, and the best case scenario is, if we can build houses in that upper income range, if we can build houses at $375,000 to $450,000, that somebody in the $200,000 home will finally have an opportunity to move up to a housing that better fits with their income. And rising tides raise all ships, and that everybody kind of moves through this process.
I see what you're saying.
And I think an additional challenge is that older adults, retirement age adults, don't have a lot of options available to them to downsize in an affordable way. They may say, I'm ready to downsize, and I want to move into a patio home, but their $250,000 of equity in their home is only going to get them so far on a $400,000 patio home.
I've heard that.
So there are not right-sized solutions for people that need to move up, and eventually, once they reach a certain age, to move down in the scale of housing that they need.
That's what I've heard. Thank you.
Of course.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Thank you, Gentry. We'll appreciate you.
Thank you so
coming
much.
out.
If you just got a little shy tonight and you do have a question that pops into your head at 3 a.m., just send me an email. Craig's got my email address. Email Craig first, and then you can call me. Yeah. Again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I hope to be a continued partner in this work, and I'm available to you for the questions and even the queries and maybe potential solutions that you have. Let's talk through it together. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, we did not pay her to come and promote our ideas.
We did offer though.
We did offer, yes. Well, we do appreciate Gentry coming and speaking and kind of giving a bigger picture outline of housing market demand and some of the economics and policies underwriting it. With that being said, we'll move on to item I2. So speaking of policy, this one is related to the letter of credit. I hope you guys read your agendas, but I will go through it. Feel free at any time to interrupt me if you have any questions about these. We do have, obviously, city staff is here. Craig is here, the city administrator, deputy city administrator Ryan Schrack. We do have our CFO, Brooke Carroll is here as well. Ryan Peck, city attorney. So if you guys do have any technical questions and I won't feel like I'm comfortable enough to answer it, please feel free to ask our city staff. They are available here. So that being said, we will dive into it. So quick background. When the city finances infrastructure that is necessary to serve development, it is part of the city's policy to require the developer to provide a financial guarantee called a letter of credit. And that letter of credit is a financial pledge from the developer's bank that holds some of the developer's cash in reserve for a specific amount of time required by the city. That amount that is held is 35% of the total cost of the improvements and is held in the case of failure by the developer to finish their project. If the developer walks away from a project that has been financed by the city is obligated to make payments for the general obligation bonds that we have issued, used when it is permanently financed until such time as the bank takes over the project and assumes the payments. So basically, the letter of credit acts as interim financing for general obligation bonds when we finance the improvements for infrastructure, which we almost always finance the improvements for infrastructure. So if the developer says, you know, the specials are too high, I can't deal with this, I haven't sold enough lots, and they walk away, we can only hold on to temporary notes for so long. We have to go to general obligation bonds. And if we have general obligation bonds, that means that we are generally obligated to pay those bonds. And so letter of credit, we say, wait a minute, we have a letter of credit. And we pull that letter of credit, and we make our payments until such time as the bank that financed the land and development takes ownership, and then they are obligated to start paying those special assessments. And so, that being said, of course, developers, you know, if you lock up some of their cash and they have multiple phases of developments, as soon as they're almost done with one phase of development, they want to release that letter of credit so that they can issue another letter of credit for that next phase. Because as soon as you're coming to the end of the lots and you want to start the next phase, you want to try to have that timing perfect to move into that next phase of development to get the housing going again and to keep selling and moving forward and progressing with your development. So, in a nutshell, right now the way that we have it is that a letter of credit is issued, 35%, so if it's $1 million, it's $350,000. At 50% certificate of occupancy for phase 1, we release 50% of that letter of credit. So if a letter of credit is $500,000, as soon as they get a certificate of occupancy on 50% of lots for that phase, we will release $250,000 back to them. We will notify the bank and they will release it. As soon as they get 80% certificate of occupancy on those lots for phase 1, we release 100% of that letter of credit. And so what we've heard from different developers and banks and others is that there are other cities that are doing it differently. And would we consider amending that policy? Number one. And would, as a city, would we consider removing that requirement from the subdivision regulations and putting it into city code, which makes it more flexible if city council wants to change that policy in the future, because then you don't have to publish it in the city newspaper, wait 20 days, take the planning commission and take it to city council and have it adopted. You could just take an ordinance before city council and say, hey, would you consider amending the policy that way? So those are the two things that are being considered for this particular item. One, removing it from the subdivision regulations but having a reference to it in the city code. And two, consider changing and modifying the policy to make it more competitive in the greater market. So those are the two things that are being considered. We're not voting on those. This is an open dialogue. So, that being said, if I can click, we're considering the possibility of, instead of a full release at 80%, what if we had a full release at 35%? And that's what some other cities are doing. Some other cities have 50%. And some cities don't even do a certificate of occupancy. They simply say, well, we'll release it at 35% if you have, you know, a certain amount of permits pulled, or you actually have substantial work being done, but no certificate of occupancy. And so this is something that we're considering. We would still like to see a certificate of occupancy. I think personally, that's something that I wanted to see, but other cities do it differently. These are some of the other cities and some of their policies, and you guys have that in your agenda packet. But Andover requires a 35% bond for letter of credit, just like we do. A 50% release occurs when 50% of the occupancy permits have been issued. 75% release, well, full release, excuse me, when 75% CFO has been issued for that phase. Bel Air has 35% letter of credit. Full release occurs at 35% of certificate of occupancy permits having been issued. So that's CFO occupancy permits. Derby, 35% bond. 50% release occurs at 35% of occupancy permits. And a full release when 75% of occupancy permits have been issued. Garden Plains, 50 reduction at 50. Full release at 75. Hayesville, 35% bond. Full release occurs at 35% of occupancy permits. Keachai has 50% release when 50% occupancy permits have been issued. 100% release when 75. Mays is a 35% bond and full release occurs at 35%. Mulvane is 35% bond. Full release occurs at 50% occupancy permits have been issued. Park City requires 35. Full release at 35. City of Rose Hill requires a 50% bond, which is kind of interesting. But then a full release occurs at 50%. Valley Center is a 35% bond, 50% release from 35, and 100% at 75. Wichita is a 35% bond and a full release when 35% of framing inspections have been issued, which is kind of interesting. And Sedgwick County has a 35% bond and the full release occurs when 35% occupancy inspections have been issued. So, this is something that Craig Cross has put together. The city administrator, he's kind of categorized in terms of risk, least risky, more risky. What does that look like? There's a small publication cost for the public hearing. This is going to go before the Planning Commission at the next regular Planning Commission meeting. Legal considerations ordinance are in draft form, which you see in your agenda package. They're being revised by the city attorney. The actions described are within the purview of the planning commission and the city council. It is recommended the city council and the planning commission to receive and file and direct staff accordingly with no action to be taken at this time. So, with that being said, as mentioned, staff is available and ready if you guys have any questions, but at this point we just ask for deliberations and your guys' thoughts.
Mike, I think it might help if you have that slide open,
Yeah.
stone that I put together maybe to help guide your discussion.
Have we had to use this before?
Letter of credit?
Have we had to use the credit for the withheld percentage in recent?
Have you ever had to call on one?
I think we had to call on it once, but Ryan, Pat, do you know off the top of your head?
Not during my time.
The
I'm not-
only time I can
So-
think of maybe, which I can't guarantee, would may have been the Hopper Edition was getting put in. I heard that the developer walked away from extending Hopper Edition to where Rusty Creek is now. I don't know if we called it at that time, but I heard that that particular developer went bankrupt. We may have had to call at that time, but that might have been anecdotal or not. I can't guarantee that. But in my time here, being 7 years almost, I haven't seen it have gone. But I wasn't here in 2008.
You mentioned the bank eventually would take over.
Yes.
Would the bank then, does the bank then compensate the city for any costs in that interim?
No.
Ryan, you want to share? one?
Yeah, so basically if a developer goes under, then the bank is going to enforce the mortgage they have against the property. So they're gonna file a lawsuit, eventually get judgment. Then what happens is the property goes to a sheriff's sale, and unless there is somebody out there who's interested in bidding more than the bank's judgment, the bank becomes the owner of the property. And as the owner of the property, they're then obligated to pay the special assessments. So what you would be looking at with that letter of credit is a stopgap measure until hopefully the bank becomes the owner and starts making those special assessment payments.
Banks don't like being developers.
No, they don't, but sometimes it happens, unavoidable.
I think you probably have to go back to the 2008 timeframe where,
2008,
from my recollection.
there were a couple of
few
notable
those.
developers in the 2008 that went belly up, and caused some damage. I haven't heard of anybody else besides that time, and I've been doing this for about 22 years, and I represent a lot of banks, so I'm on both sides of these transactions.
So the safest is what we're doing right now, right?
Yes, we are the safest.
But to be more competitive, we need to be a little bit more aggressive.
Staff was thinking something closer to the middle. What we are finding in some of the discussions that we're hearing is some folks are using this against us when they're considering what communities they want to invest in. To this point, again, it's anecdotal, it's speculation, it's hard to say what potential projects have we lost because of this. I think for all of us, we're probably pretty happy with building 200 houses a year, but the more we divide that pie up, the tax burden's less for all of us, and it creates more opportunity to reinvest in infrastructure and also secure some generational security for the community. So to have more growth is helpful. This is a tool, but obviously we want to make sure that we're safeguarding as well. That's why this exists. There wasn't a lot of letter of credit type things going on back in 08. In fact, I believe that's why this is occurring in this era, is because of some of those issues. But again, the letter of credit is an opportunity for a stopgap before then the bank would be the one paying those specials. There's a really small chance that the city would be the one holding the bag in this type of situation. You want to talk more about that stopgap period?
I mean, I would characterize the risk as, of something catastrophic happening like '08, very unlikely. You can never say never. And really what the city would need is that cash flow to be making the bond payments during that interim period until the bank completes its foreclosure and either sells the property to somebody else who's then going to assume those payments, or the bank takes over ownership and starts making those special assessment payments. So what you're really looking at is that interim period. Now, more often than not, if somebody really goes belly up, they're probably not going to have a ton of resources to pay a lawyer to fight and drag out that foreclosure process for an extended period of time. And, most cases from the point of filing to the point of conclusion, assuming worst case scenario, you've got the discovery process, you go to a trial, it's about a year. We're running about a year in Kansas. Sometimes it's less than that, sometimes it's longer than that. And that's if it's fully contested all the way through. Now you can have appeals on top of that, and that could drag it out for a couple of more years, depending on how far the case goes. But oftentimes when a party is in financial distress and they're in foreclosure, they're not typically mounting a fight, or if they are, they're not mounting it for too long. So what you're looking at is some measure of protection for that, let's say, 1 to 3 year period where you may need to be able to draw those funds in order to cover the bond payments until the bank or somebody else takes over ownership and can pay that bill.
Hey, Mike, would I be able to throw a comment in here?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. My name is Ken Lee. I work for Garver. We're an engineering firm that does developments.
We didn't pay Ken Lee either.
I'm not getting paid either. We did Trails End, and we're here to talk about the last item on the agenda tonight. The one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet that I want to mention about the problem with requiring that high percentage for release is if you have a developer who has really, really deep pockets, that doesn't matter. But when you're holding it till 80% occupancy, if they can't start their next phase until they get 80% full, by the time they get their next phase financed, engineering plans done, construction done, they've lost all the momentum in their addition. And by releasing it earlier, you're allowing them to get started on that next phase while they still have momentum, they still got a lot of new lots, they've got a lot of traffic. So that's one advantage to consider releasing it at a lower rate. Whatever that number might be is up to your discretion as far as what that number is. But with the 80% occupancy for full release, if you've got 50 lots, you've only got 10 lots left when you're starting your project. And these days with bureaucracy the way it is, it can take over a year to get going, and you could end up losing all your momentum on the project before you got the next lots ready to go. So I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
That was going to be my question. Is there any rule of thumb about when a second phase or a next phase would start? Once they completed the other one and building's begun, they want to look at the second one. Is there an occupancy that you see before the second one starts?
No, that's
Depends on the developer.
actually. I mean, what I see for, if a phase is progressing relatively expeditiously, like for example, Cloverleaf was by far the fastest development I've ever seen. The rates were incredibly low, and so they couldn't build fast enough. And they did phase 1, phase 2, almost year after year. It's incredibly fast. But obviously, homes that are priced higher, like Arbor Creek, for example, those phases go slower, especially if federal fund rate increases and the 30-year mortgage starts increasing, then the lots start selling slower, and then maybe they're less likely to do the next phase. Because if they do the next phase, they have specials, and who knows how long that will take, and so they might slow that down. But it really depends on the price of the homes that are being sold, the price of the lots, and then the 30-year mortgage rate. That's how fast you'll see the next phase.
I don't feel like we've, in my short time, even looking back to 2016, exclusive of the ones that have been built out all in one phase, maybe two, like Cloverleaf, I don't feel like we're ever timing these up very well, and I think a lot of it is because of that 80%. I'll use the Bridger and Maple example. I mean, they're almost completely finished with that phase. I mean, I think they're already getting ready to dig out for footings on the last few lots out there, and we're just now getting to the point where not too long ago we released their letter of credit. They're wanting to expedite into phase 2, but they're way behind because they've been waiting for that release. So we may be waiting months before they're building that second phase, even though all the lots in the first phase are going to be built here pretty quick. And what we're seeing out there in that particular instance is they're filling.
When the developer is gonna get into trouble, is it typically before that first 35%? Or the first 50% occupancy?
Not sure.
So that was my question, is there math to back it up? Because if you know that you're at, if you have an idea of what your average bond size is and what those payments are, and you know that more than 35%, you know what the average of that is, could you figure out, and I'm asking this without having any clue, but is there a way to sit there and say, our risk is pretty well mitigated at 50%, our risk is mitigated actually at 35%, could you do any math to back it up?
We will get that question in writing and ask our bond counsel, who will have a great answer, I'm sure.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you here today, I'd be speculating.
Okay, well, I didn't expect you to.
I think if you could get data to support what he's asking, that would give us a more, that would give us more to work with in terms of how far we want to go with mitigating the risk.
Well, we'll work on getting that. You know, having some time to sit with this, I don't think we want to change that bond amount, but that 80%, changing it to 75, which is what that next tranche below us, that's not even worth the change. It's really nothing. But maybe dropping that 80 down to 50 would be a pretty moderate move, in my opinion. So, but we'll get some more answers to some of these questions. I'll make sure that Commissioner Hayden and Micah give a bond counsel to bring you guys an answer back, and we'll email it out even before the next meeting.
There's just a lot happening in our community, and a lot of developers are looking at us. You know, and all different kinds of developers. So
That's a great thing. Yeah.
Is there a way to measure, like, I don't know if this even exists or not, like a developer rated another developer, kind of like a credit rating? And could this be flexible? Like the higher credit rating the developer has is more flexible for the forgiveness versus somebody coming out like, I got an idea, you know?
That puts a lot of pressure on administration to pick winners and losers, so we would prefer not to do that, but I appreciate you trusting us.
I think the bank does that when they evaluate the letter of credit.
Good point.
I think really the point of contention, I think 35% is probably a little too far for us to go. In that 50% range, that's probably the point that it would mitigate the issue of slowing the developer down. And I don't think at that point, the risk we're taking on in making that type of adjustment is too severe. I think at 35%, maybe you're opening yourself up to a more risk. That's my personal take on the thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, our risk is way down the line, because when we go out for temporary financing, we have a 3 to 4 year period, and we borrow the capitalized interest. So we're really not even going to get into troubles with payments, with special assessments, until they go onto the tax roll, which can even be an extended period after that. So you're looking at 3 to 6 years before payments can even probably start coming in for special assessments. And I think maybe we would have an idea in that interim if a developer's having trouble, and be able to make some changes before it got to that is a way to maybe think about it too.
There will be signs.
Right.
And we have a land bank, I think, in Goddard we may have set up last year. There's some really tricky strategies that we can utilize with that to reduce the city's risk. it's pretty amazing what our high-powered attorneys and bond counsels are able to do to help us out in tough situations. But Mayor, I think what I'm hearing is we kind of look at dropping that 80 to 50, but also in the interim, we send out some answers to the question of Commissioner Hayden.
I personally would feel more comfortable going slower than fast right off the bat. I think we have been conservative for all this time, and making a conservative decision would be wiser than.
What do you mean slower?
Well, I'm just saying, right now we're at 80%. I feel like if we went to 35%, that would be pretty extreme for what we're doing. And I think if we could just reduce it conservatively, that would be a better way to go about this, if that was our choice to do.
That's why I was saying 50.
Yes, and I would take the partial payment out, I would just go to 50 and 100%.
Shotgun one up.
Sorry, the trap door button.
You don't like the idea.
Just say
Right. You have to kick him,
The other item would be, how do you guys feel about the idea of removing it from the subdivision regulations and putting it under city code? And so that way, if the policy was gonna be revised in the future, it would come before city council first, and as an ordinance. Actually, it wouldn't go to planning commission at all, it would go straight to city council with an ordinance, if you wanted to amend it in the future.
This is kind of a deregulation consideration. Sometimes we see ping pong, with the council and the planning commission, and it would be helpful to be able to be more reactive to some of the economic changes that are happening. But that
Take out some of the bureaucracy here.
yes.
That'd be nice.
Not to speak for all of the planning commissioners here, but based on the track record, yes, it's a stopgap that we need to have, but it's not something we utilize regularly. I would think you could move it and let city council manage it. That would make sense under the current situation, or the lack thereof, if you will. I agree.
Do you guys want to dwell on this anymore, or shall I move on to item I3? Is there anybody else who wants to provide comments on this and feedback that staff can provide? Seeing none, I'll just move on. Okay. So no action on this one. Obviously, we have to publish this, and it's going to go before. We already have published, I should say. It's going to come before Planning Commission first in September, and then City Council in September. So item I3, this one's kind of interesting. This one's is unspent no proceeds and cost oversizing policy. So, yes, go for it.
Are those going to come as two separate items, or as one?
It's going to be one item. Yes. So it's one item for you guys, because the ordinance that you will see in September will be the removal from the subdivision regulations. The item you guys will see will be the removal from the subdivision regulations, and then the addition of an ordinance added to city code. You guys will see two ordinances, and you guys will see one ordinance.
So this won't focus on the percentage at this time?
No, because technically, no, at this point, it would just be the removal. But you will see both, because I'll have draft ordinances for both. But you guys will be seeing it being removed. You guys will be seeing it being removed from subdivision regulations, and then another ordinance added it to the city code with that percentage change. So, good question. So, in conversation with developers, the cost of running infrastructure to potential development comes up frequently. The discussion tends to circle around what type of infrastructure is necessary to serve development compared to what the city would like to see in expectation of future growth. So what this looks like is a developer might want a 10-inch water line to serve their development, and the city is saying, hey, your development is right here, but theoretically there could be more developments above you or next to you or in the future. We would like to see a 12-inch water line. The way the policy is written now is that we have historically cost shared in that participation. So developer is saying, I need a 10-inch water line. We're saying, we want a 12-inch water line, so we will pay the additional cost for the 2 inches to oversize. That cost is a city at large contribution. So like, let's say hypothetically it was a 90-10 split. 90% of that cost would go to the improvement district, which is what you would typically see. 10% would be city at large contributions. What we've seen is that sometimes, not always, sometimes you will bid a project, and let's say it's $1 million, and then Pearson comes in and they're the low bidder for $800,000, and we have a cost savings of $200,000. What we've historically done is taken that $200,000 and just used it to pay down the temporary notes when we go to permanent financing. And so one of the ideas that came up with is take that $200,000 and use it towards our cost contribution for those extra 2 inches for oversizing. So that's the thought. Also, we've also thought about that idea of removing it from the subdivision regulations, putting it under the city code, so that city council, if they want to modify this in the future, we don't have to publish it in the city newspaper, take it to the planning commission, and take it to city council, or just come before city council as an ordinance. So those are the 2 things you guys are considering on this one, is cost contribution for oversizing. What does that look like now? What could it look like? And removing it from the subdivision regulations with the exception of a reference to the city code where it would originally finally take its resting place. So, feel free to discuss that amongst yourselves and ask us any questions that you might have. They're all in draft form. They're in your agendas, but they're in draft.
Mayor, if I could give a couple examples.
Please do.
I'm sorry, if you don't mind.
I do not.
Well, we got a couple of projects that come to mind, and it's like, wow, it'd be really nice if we could be the benefit of some of this savings, since, you know, we've got skin in the game. The Gallery Galleria one comes to mind, and, you know, we're contributing $200,000 towards that project, and the engineer's estimate is like $600,000 higher than what the low bid came back in. So the development itself and then the specials are going to get reduced because of that massive savings, and we're not benefiting from that at all. So that's an extreme example. Trails End is another one where we contributed, again, I don't know why it's the magic number, but $200,000 to increase the water main size for the arterial line. I don't remember in that circumstance if we had unspent note proceeds, but there again, if we did, it would be nice if we were able to pay ourselves back for some of that. So there was another one, I want to say we call it the Southeast Quarter Lift Station. It serves Arbor Creek and a few others down there. You know, the city made a substantial contribution to that project, and we're kind of recollecting some of that over time as new developments hook onto it, such as the one we're going to discuss later this evening. But there again, another example where we are kicking in, and it'd be nice to be able to get some of that money back. I think we're also going to start seeing more of this. The engineer Garber, you know, he may speak to that some, but we're starting to see some stabilization with inflation. The CPI came out, what, Mayor, last week we talked about it, 2.6%. That's starting to look pretty favorable. So some of our estimates, we may have overestimated a little bit because some of that stuff, those estimates are months, if not a year old. And if pricing's coming down, you know, there may be a lot of opportunity for leftover note proceeds to be available on some of these.
So the difference is, if I understand it correctly, is that if we do apply the savings to help pay for it, then that gets assessed back to the property owner, to the property owners in that development, not the city at large.
Correct. Yeah.
Is there any reason we couldn't, I mean, you kind of started this topic off of saying traditionally we have cost shared when we ask them to upgrade. Could an alternative just be to make a policy that when you ask them to upgrade, it's automatically just assessed back to the development?
Yes, so you can simply force them to, that, you know, I have to sit in that meeting, I have to say, hey, we're gonna do this. They're not usually happy when that happens. Not to say that, you know, they're scary or anything like that, you know, but usually they want to sign the petition, they want to move forward the project, but if they feel like it's too cost prohibitive based on what their engineer is telling them, because they hire their own engineering firm to do the assessment, if they feel like their margins are just impossible, they'll just walk away from the project. So if we add too much cost on them, it's kind of this weird balancing game that you have to play that you have to say, this is what we're looking at. Now, developers have said, that's unfair to us, that we would require a 12-inch line when my development is only needing a 10-inch line, because development B doesn't exist. There is no development B, but you're saying development B will be here at some point. So why do I have to take on this cost, this theoretical cost, for a future development that doesn't exist? That it may never exist, and that's what the argument is against it. And so we try to balance that with saying, okay, is that equitable? Is that reasonable? Because now you have made that development with all those future citizens bear the burden of that extra 2 inches, when the next development that comes on down the road may not incur as high of a cost. Their specials may be lowered. So how is that equitable, and how is that distribution fair and reasonable given cost participation and growth over time? So that's the argument that comes against us. And so we look at these and we say, well, fair, we will cost participate. But then with all these bids coming in, Bridger and Maple was a great example. Bridger and Maple, we bid it, and it came in $1.5 million below the bid. $1.5 million, and we just took that and we just paid down the specials. So, I mean, in theory, we could use, and we didn't cost oversize on that particular one, but if we did, you could have used $1.5 million as part of that cost contribution from the city's part. Maybe our cost contribution was only $500,000. They're still getting $1 million in savings to reduce their specials, but we're saying, hey, no city at large cost contribution in that particular way. But you are right. You could say that our development policy simply requires, you have an arterial line here, it's going to be a 12-inch.
Commissioner Milligan, I think the reason you may want to keep the flexibility is because this doesn't apply just to residential development. I mean, I'm going to throw a good one out there. It's football season. What if the Goddard Chiefs call us up and they want to relocate the NFL stadium, southwest of town? You may want to kick in to oversize that 12-inch main to, a 24-inch line or something. So
Yeah.
Is our current standard 12 inches? Is that what the standard is like across the board?
for arterial, so think of our main streets, the mile section roads or whatever. Typically we want 12-inch mains on those, but the inside the developments, that they're 8-inch mains. So, but when they're bringing a new development online, and a lot of the stuff's happening on the periphery, they're having to extend on those primary roads where we need to have the 12-inch mains. All we're really wanting to do is to be able to be the benefactor of some of the savings when the engineer's estimate is higher than the actual cost.
Yeah, I think it sounds great. I just wondered if it could go any further than just when the bids happen to be lower. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't.
Yeah, there's a period of time where they were just perpetually higher.
Yeah.
And, it's getting a lot better though.
So in doing that, then the cost is being paid for and borne by the end user, the homeowner, for their assessment each month to cover that.
So we pay ourselves back, and then it goes back to the homeowners.
Whatever, just to use round numbers, if there's $500,000 difference, the city contributed $200,000, we'd get our $200,000 back, then there'd be $300,000 there to help pay down the note, so the specials would be lowered. We can kind of share in that good news, so to speak.
But if it's not being assessed to the new homeowners, it basically goes to the city fund, which means the entire
Yes.
city's paying for it.
And so when you see a petition, that's perfect. But when you see a petition, hypothetically, let's say it was 90%, they say 90% to the improvement district, that's the new development. 10% city at large, that's the rest of the city. And that's how a petition is drafted. And so you'll say, most of the petitions come in, 100% will come to the improvement district. That means that new development is going to absorb 100% of that cost, whatever that cost is. If it's sewer, water, storm, or paving, or whatever it is. That's typical. Some of them, we've done before, where it says 75% will be to the improvement district and 25% will be city at large. That means the whole rest of the city will pay for it with, and that doesn't mean that the whole rest of the city gets hit with a special assessment. It simply means that we're dedicating general obligation taxes towards that.
And those specials are paid out over 15 years.
20 years.
We want the specials to be lower too, because those are our citizens, and we want those lots to move, we want the economic value out of them. But we see with some of these wide gaps in actual cost versus what the estimates were, that there's a substantial balance there that we feel is appropriate for us to be able to call on some of that.
So your bank overcharges you 2.5 years on special.
You don't have specials anymore.
They overcharge me 2.5 years.
Oh, no.
Yeah, have a good refund check.
Savings plan.
Yes.
Thing are auditors. Any other questions? You guys good for Sean's
Is this something you guys want us to pursue? And the bond council tells us we can memorialize it in the city code, and then it can also just be put in the bond documents when we go through the temporary note proceedings.
I think you should pursue it.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
The other item would be removing it from the subdivision regulations with the exception of a reference and codifying it in the city code so that it can be amended by the city council with an ordinance in the future if you wanted to see it done that way.
As long as you're not working us out of a job on that.
No, you guys have plenty of plats and site plans to review and variances and conditional use permits.
And zoning amendments.
Zoning amendments, et cetera. Yeah, there's plenty you guys see that the city council will never see.
Again, I think it makes sense to make it more flexible.
Okay.
That's one opinion, but.
You guys will see it in September. So publish it in the city newspaper. The drafts are before you. You will see it in September, and after that, it'll go to city council. Do you guys want to talk about I-3 anymore, or shall I move on? Is there any other questions related to that? Okay. This is item I4. This is the
Hold
R.
on a second.
Yes.
We're gonna do a little furniture rearranging, and maybe let's take like a 3 or 4 minute break here.
Sure.
I'd like to stretch and maybe do cookies.
At 7:43, do you guys want to go ahead and can I get a motion in a second to take a short break, maybe for 10 minutes to come back at 7:53?
I'll make a motion.
5 minutes? Do you want 5 minutes or 10 minutes? 5 minutes, okay, so you guys will be back here at 7:48. Can I get a motion in a second?
I'll make a motion.
I'm getting it for your chair.
All in favor, say aye.
Short break. 7:50, so if everyone can have their seats, we'll move forward. We did invite our guests up here, but their item is going to be I-5. We're going to move into I-4, which will be interesting, so we'll just move forward. But I-4 relates to our R4 Strategic Growth Zone Overlay District. So, feel free to stop me anytime you guys have any questions. But as the city grows and competes with Wichita's western border, city staff looks at how it can position itself to maximize the limited amount of land available while continuing to grow and protect its interests. One way of incentivizing stronger growth patterns is creating an area of interest for developers that would allow them to build higher density developments by right within a defined area. This proposed area would be called the City Strategic Growth Zone. It would be an overlay outlined by a map showing where land once annexed could potentially be rezoned as an R4 if Planning Commission and City Council felt favorably in that direction. It's basically like looking at a future land use map. It doesn't give them the ability to simply annex and be classified as an R4. We can't do it that way legally speaking. But what we could do is say, hey, if we create a map and we define it as an overlay district and we say within this overlay district, which is basically a future land use map, Planning Commission and City Council may look favorably upon approving a rezoning to an R4. So that's kind of what this is looking at. Each tract of land would have to go through a public hearing just like you would for anything else, and so it doesn't negate any of that. We would still have to go through the public notice period, 20 days, publish it in the paper, take it to Planning Commission for each individual tract within that strategic growth zone, but we're hoping that this overlay district would be a symbol of solidarity between the Planning Commission and City Council and sort of a beacon to developers saying, hey, they will look favorably upon a rezoning request by the developer if it's in this area. So, the overlay district would be included in the zoning, so it would be under Article 4, so I'd have to publish this first in the city newspaper. So planning, if you guys felt favorably towards this, you wouldn't see it till October, because I have to wait 20 days per state law for an overlay, because it has to go under Article 4. It would not give the Planning Commission or the City Council extra jurisdictional authority, so it doesn't give you extra authority outside the city limits. It doesn't mean that you can circumnavigate, the Board of County Commissioners or anything like that. It just simply says we're looking into the future, and we're hoping that Planning Commission and City Council will shake hands on this potential overlay district. So, what I did is I pulled GIS data for Wichita and Goddard. So this is what Goddard looked like in 2000, this is what Wichita looked like in 2000. And so what we did is we looked at 2000 Goddard in Wichita, we looked at 2025 Goddard in Wichita, and then I projected theoretically what Wichita could look like if Goddard did not grow, but only Wichita grew for the next 25 years. And the way we did that is we chopped Wichita down and we said that Wichita in a very specific area grew at a specific rate in a specific way for 25 years. And then we extrapolated that and we projected that to say theoretically Wichita grew by about 6,000 acres over a 25-year period. And so then we looked at Central County GIS data and we said if it's undeveloped land that has a higher probability of being annexed and developed, so that's probably where Wichita would grow in the future because that's the land that would be bought and developed. And does that equal the composition of all that land equal about 6,000 acres as we move into the future? So that's how we did it. Obviously that leaves a lot of subjective interpretation, but that's kind of the theory we used. So this is us in 2000. This is just historical parcel data. This is 2025 Goddard. This is our current limits. This is Wichita's current limits. And this would be Wichita by 2050 if we didn't grow and if we didn't, kind of reestablish our boundaries. And so, like I said, that methodology was reasonable, but not perfect. So I just wanted that to take into account. I'm not saying in 2050 this is exactly what Wichita could look like, but theoretically it could look that way, given reasonable expectations and growth patterns. This is the strategic growth zone that we are proposing. So once again, the purple, what we're saying is it's not by, you won't automatically get this. You still, if you bought this land, would still have to go through the public hearing, the 20-day notice, the rezoning, the Planning Commission, and then City Council, and finally City Council passes an ordinance to rezone it. We still have to go through that. What City staff is asking is would the planning commission and city council feel favorably about classifying the purple as a strategic growth zone, so that if a developer bought this, they would feel more inclined to get their higher density zoning classification and then annex into Goddard as opposed to potentially being annexed into Wichita. And as you can see here, Wichita is not opposed to doing island annexations themselves. And so obviously with an island annexation, something like we have here and what Wichita has here and over here, that has to go before the Board of County Commissioners as well. So even if we did say that, hey, Mr. Developer, if they bought it down here, and we would consider an island annexation, we still would have to take that to the BOCC and say, we think this is a reasonable annexation and we are more capable of serving that than Wichita. And then we would fight that fight bureaucratically with my counterparts in Wichita. So, feel free to discuss. But there's no binding action. I haven't drafted any ordinances because we've changed this after we spoke with some of our attorneys. So you guys have probably seen it's in October. So I haven't drafted any ordinances related to this.
What kind of resistance do you think you see from Citizens County on annexing within the purple?
So you talking about the Board of County Commissioners?
Yes.
So the Board of County Commissioners, they're generally, the last time we did this island annexation, I went to the, the Ronald Reagan building to present my case, and they were surprisingly not that interested. They just simply approved it, and that largely was because we spoke with our counterparts, so Philip Stievenbergen, Neil Strauss, some other planners at the MAPD office, because they're the ones who are going to compile the agenda report. So when they presented their agenda report, the real selling of it is selling it to the people who are sitting in the offices over there and saying, hey, this is what we think we can do. Because they're going to ask me all the hard questions, like, can you start with fire and EMS? Where's your water? Where's your sewer? Do you have a lift station? What's the topography? What's that going to look like? Are you going to provide code enforcement? So I have to fight that fight over the phone, present data, and convince them. If I can convince them, they'll convince the BOCC, and then they approve it. So that's where the fight's going to be. If we end up over here, this would be a hard fight, because I would have to really try to finagle with my counterparts that somehow we are more capable of serving this than Wichita, which that would be hard. That'd be a hard fight. Doesn't mean it's an impossible fight, just means it'd be a hard fight.
And that's only for island annexation, so some of you guys may be aware of this, or it's been shared with you in the past, but the county references a growth map, and that's kind of their rule book of reference when they determine which city gets to win out on some of these island annexation debates. And some cities were very aggressive because they remap this every 10 years, and they drew the biggest bubble as possible around their city. Our bubble's not that big, especially on the north side of 54. I believe some of Wichita's bubble goes west of 167th, which is a little scary, especially as you get further north. So what this may be more helpful for in the near term is going to be consent annexations, where you have property that's adjacent to current city limits in this purple area that would not be subject to BOCC authority whatsoever. They only have a say if it's an island annexation, and then they're going to reference that growth map. Hopefully in a few more years we'll be able to redraw it and make our bubble a little bigger, but unfortunately that's largely what they're going to make those decisions on. At the same token, we don't necessarily want to be island annexing stuff, as far away as Micah referenced, because think of the cost of infrastructure to get out there. Now, we got a little bit of a leg up because we got some real big water lines running up and down Kellogg, so it's just a matter of dragging them down. But another component of this is the further away you get from the core, the more residential density you need, because you need the revenue for the very expensive infrastructure that's being dragged out of town. Okay, so that's one of the impetus as well for why you may want to look favorably on residential density a little bit further outside of the city core. It's an overlay district, it's non-binding, it's more of a point of reference too for you and for the development community that's looking at us.
And the further we go out, we got the same issues that we discovered with our water pressure study last year. I think your looping that we're going to do in the next year or two is going to take care of the pressure. That's really kind of within the immediate area. And so the further we get and move out, then we just have to watch those things as well. And then if you look in there, some of those areas have already been developed. I think was it kind of in the county, that Reese development and some of those things. I don't think those people are too excited about being annexed into any city either way. I mean, that's the reason why they built out there. But, I think at some point, the other piece of this, then, that is the actual highway overlay for the northwest bypass. You can see from Mays, and then if you look at that, there's the area east of the Eisenhower High School. There's an overlay district. About 40% of the right-of-way's been purchased. The state's got $38 million, and it kind of runs down through that area, and then it curves down 167th Street.
That right there, Mayor, is actually part of the overlay.
Right.
That's that area 151 development, so it'll go right through there.
You bring it down 167. Yeah. So I mean, that's the other piece of this is, I think that if it gets built, when it gets built, that creates a barrier, a natural barrier between our community and what's on the other side of that highway. And so in that 2 mile, you know, basically from 167 to 151st Street, 108, in that area there, anything to the east of that gets developed like the rest of Wichita. And then we can look at being a little more particular on the west side of the expressway in terms of the density issue. But if we don't do anything and we just sit and wait, that area is going to develop in the next 15 years. So it's just a matter of whether it's Goddard at this point, and as we pursue some of this development, basically along that 167th Street corridor. Like, yeah, I mean, and depending on, you know, you look at all that growth on the south end, but say if half of that in the south goes up north of us, you could have Wichita, you know, on its way towards 215th Street, you know, just depending on how all that plays out. And there's some development up north of town too that I think kind of the same issue. You got, you know, 20 acres and large houses over that built in some of those quarter sections. So.
I mean, personally, I think like I said, it's going to get developed, and the developments that are there now, the newer ones are all, you know, that like that area 151. It's those duplexes. There's a bunch of there. A big apartment complex right on Big Central on 135th or whatever. So what's getting developed out there recently has been the more dense. So that's probably what's coming. Yeah. And it's either going to be Wichita or it's going to be Goddard. Yeah. And I'd personally rather be Goddard to want to help the city out with more revenue and also to stop it from becoming another Roselle or something where we're encapsulated.
I agree. I personally think it's a great idea.
So it gives them quiet on this side of the table.
Just curious why you don't go farther west.
Gotta build the line first.
You gotta hold the storm.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, waiting on the northwest bypass, that may be what, 20, 25 years?
Well, I think at this point, what I'm thinking is that you state
For another-
R4 development to the west of that, and then we can be a little more particular about what's built to the west. So
Which is fine, we still have that, I mean, this
Right.
is just a
Sure.
suggestion for discussion. I mean, just a question, I mean.
No, it's, that's.
I mean, if like, why wouldn't we entertain all the way to 215?
Chairman, I think if it were up to city staff, you've heard us promoting residential density, you heard it from an expert this evening. I think if it were totally up to us, we would suggest such a thing, but we have to also pay attention to public sentiment. I think the difference between going west versus towards east is the obvious things. You know, we want the land of most economic value that's further east, we want that in the city, we don't want to be growing around, right?
Yeah, if it's up to me, the purple would go to Nebraska. So.
There's a lot of people out there that would like that
I
concept.
said you had to stop at Sedgwick County. Can't go any further than that.
Tie my own hands.
But I know it becomes difficult because of the development that's there in those areas is much
Well,
more
and
rural.
this isn't-
But I was just curious, I mean, at least north of Goddard, I mean, it kind of makes sense that could potentially be, but anyway, just a question.
And the other thing is, if you saw the map of the developments that are north of us, there's a couple of those sections that are almost pretty well filled in. I was looking at that the other day, and it's like, you know, the opportunities of open tracts of ground are a little bit more limited, I think, to the north of us than to the south, actually.
Well, it just allows for R4. You're still gonna see R1 and R, you know,
Sure.
more or less dense projects as well within there, but the higher density ones is what subsidize the ability to be able to finance the lower density ones.
And we're moving into the growth zone with that. And I think that just, then it's easy for all of us to say, you know, the density that we need, we're gonna get from that point where the development is going to come the next 10 to 15 years. And then whoever takes over this gig, you know, we're gone, they can deal with us growing into Garden There'll be buying
the war
expanding. Yeah, that's right. We'll have to open up a western front.
Well, part of the reason for my question is, let's just say Goddard grows to 21st Street. If we're 100% residential up there, there are no amenities. There's nothing for them, for those, you know, for that group of people that's part of the Goddard city limits. There's no restaurants. They're going into Wichita. That's why I asked the question.
No,
and I know R4 doesn't cover that, but in the grand scheme of things, as you think about it, we're gonna have to have business some kind.
I think this actually encourages business, because
Right.
you may see some retail parcels set aside on 167 and have the more dense projects behind it, you know?
And that is true as well.
Yeah, density encourages that, so let's, we just concentrated on residential too, then we'll let Wichita encompass that. They're gonna be putting into businesses and getting revenue with some of our residents, so I think we need to draw our battle lines.
Yeah.
Stake our territory from the tent, right?
When we originally discussed this, you know, we were hoping that it'd be by right upon annexing into the city, but we found that we can only establish the overlay district. Staff still thinks there's a ton of value in that, especially as we're having development conversations with different folks that want to invest in the community.
Explain that again. I mean, what the issue on that was?
Basically, the due process issue, but maybe a little more extent to that, but Ryan could share more.
Well, I mean, there's just statutory provisions that provide that upon annexation, it carries with it the zoning classification that it had out in the county.
Okay.
And we can't change that upon annexation.
Gotcha.
Without going through the,
We have to go
Regular
through the
rigmarole.
zoning, the regular zoning
Right,
process.
gotcha.
If I can come up with a clever idea that won't find us in court, We
That's
can
the
revisit
idea,
that.
we don't wanna be in court.
So, I mean,
Mayor, the more extreme version to still accomplish that would be like the case study that was shared with us this evening in Spokane, Washington, where they just eliminated the R1 zoning district. So you were able to build these higher dense uses by right in the city limits, so to speak. I don't know that we're there yet.
I think if we did that, you'd see 5 new people up here.
Yeah.
To elections.
Fairly long, but not there yet. Now, I like the fact that it is still up for discussion and we can kind of evaluate it,
Sure.
not just leave it wide open, but it is necessary. I think that.
You know, a lot of things we have to look at too, is it's not far benefit. We're gonna be dead and stinking, you know, when this really comes to fruition, right? I mean, this is for generational growth. This is for the survival of Goddard as a whole and to grow. If we're not growing, we're gonna die. You know, so that's the way I approach this thing. You know, they may not benefit our generation or even our kids, but 50 years down the road, that's, you know, when the city should be getting younger, the older it gets. We get older and die, but the city should get younger and more prosperous over time.
And the other piece of this, in terms of water, we've made some good strides this year on water. But in order to build a water treatment plant, we need about 4,000 water meters. The debt service charge on the water meters now is $10 for the sewage treatment plant. That debt rolls off in 2034. But at 4,000 water meters, $20 a month, that's $80,000 a month. It's $960,000 a year. Valley Center's water treatment plant, they're building one for $20 million. The debt service payment on the loan they got through Topeka, one of the, I don't know, through Ag or through whatever, but the payment on $20 million was around $840,000. So within the realm of possibilities that we could have quality water out here at an additional $10 per month charge for when it lives in the community. So that growth factor and the timing of that, the way we're going, be pretty close to paying off those bonds on the sewage treatment plant to be able to fund the water treatment plant, which will eliminate thousands of dollars of Culligan business and bottled water and everything else. So, and I think if we could do that, I think that would be a multi-generational win for our community, because people will look back and say that we made a hard decision to provide quality water. And in the book we've looked at, you know, one of the 13 ways to kill your community is not have, well, of course, quantity. If you don't have any water, everybody's leaving town, but also the quality. And I know my chiropractor says that our water is so hard when he drinks it, it breaks his teeth. So it's an issue that, I mean, there's all these things that go relate with the growth that we have to consider to work on to make the quality of life here as good as we can make it. So that's my water soapbox tonight. It's pretty good.
Okay. You guys want to talk about this one anymore? It'll be published in the city newspaper. I gotta take it to planning commission first, which will be October, because I have to wait 20 days. And then you guys can see it in October after that. Okay. This is item I-5. So our guests are here tonight. This is the Wapendale Land Use Development discussion. So on August 6th, around 5:30 p.m., members of the Planning Commission and members of the City Council took a trip to Bel Air to review some duplexes being built. The evidence behind this trip was the gauge of quality and type of duplexes being built, as developer John Wolfnell would like to build duplexes of similar nature on the northeast corner of 183rd and 31st. The developer is working with Gardner Engineering and they have come up with preliminary layout. I think it's actually the northwest corner. Okay, the 31st. Developer is working with Gardner Engineering. They have come up with a preliminary layout for this corner. The proposed layout is a mix of single family with duplexes equal to around 76% of the total lots. There is no formal action for this one. The developer would like to know how he can proceed with development, what the Planning Commission City Council would like to see. A full fiscal impact analysis is attached in Exhibit I.5B. There are 250 lots being proposed. 191 of them would be duplex lots. 59 would be single family lots. Potential permit fees would be around $2,715,000. Potential property taxes per year at full build-out would be around $341,151.29 per year. Over 35 years, the proposed development would have a positive net impact of $850,000, $334, assuming, with the petitions being provided, that number could obviously change. So the land, the yellows are city limits. This is 183rd, 31st. This is the development being proposed over in this area, the blue. This is Arbor Creek. This is the theoretical layout. They have 191 duplex lots with 59 single family lots with 250 total, 76% would be duplex. So at this point, I would allow Ken Lee, Garber, agent for the applicant, or John, if he would like, to speak on it and kind of give a narrative and a proposal and the big idea behind the project.
Well, good evening, and I'm Ken Lee with Garber, agent for the applicant, and he's covered the generalities of it, and we know that every community is kind of getting the duplex fatigue, and we don't want to just see all duplexes on everything right now. So we had a conversation with city staff, and they said that we'll have to have some mix of single family homes in here along with the 2-family homes or the twin homes for this to be successful. So this is our first stab at it, and the primary goal here is the idea that putting the single family lots up against the single family lots of Arbor Creek, so we're not putting duplex exclusively against there. And the cul-de-sac at the east end, we currently have that shown as duplexes just because we thought about doing single family on the north side, but then you get into your own kind of weird mix at that point, so that's how we have it shown right now. So I do want to just say, as Mike has said, the good thing about tonight is we're looking for guidance as far as what are you looking for, what would be more acceptable to you. So this is subject to change based on the feedback tonight. But so this is kind of what we have for our starting point. We are looking at targeting, these are going to be both almost exclusively slab lots, so it'll be no step entries. They're going to be marketing towards the 55 plus community is one of the things they're going to be looking at trying to do here, is marketing towards that. On the larger lots, one thing that we've seen some success, some of other developers have seen some success, is adding third car garages onto them, because that makes them more likely where somebody might be owner occupied. If they can have that third car garage to store their stuff, and even for the renters, that the one thing bad is having storage capabilities in these units. So we will look at adding more third car garages through here as space allows. Again, marketing towards the 55 plus community. That middle white space that we have shown there is a proposed detention pond area, and that'll end up could be some kind of site amenity as well, but that's where our detention pond is going to be. At the south line of the yellow, I'll mention there's a large drainage channel coming in from the west, so we've aligned that property line to be able to carry the water through. So we'll have a storm sewer and drainage system that would run through the bottom of those lots and into there to carry that water through. So we've already been looking at utility layouts and drainage as far as how this impacts. One of the things we kind of wanted to do on this, you'll notice the one road that curves through there, it goes all the way through. So they wanted to create, I don't know if I really want to use the word boulevard, but they wanted to make it simple for somebody driving through the subdivision. It's not a bunch of straight lines, but you don't have to make a bunch of turns in order to drive through the development. So that's one thing we wanted to have, is kind of a core road that goes through the middle of it. So that's one thing, just as far as making it easy to get through. We talked with Micah about commercial development at the southeast corner, but with this location where it is, we don't think it's really viable in the short term for that to be a good commercial corner, just because rooftops in the area. We're kind of at the eastern edge of the community at this point. So we're proposing it right now to be shown as single family or as duplex lots in that part. The exact configuration is going to shift on that over time, probably, but That's kind of the crux of it. I'll take any questions. John, do you have anything you want to add right now, or do you want to just wait for questions? So we'll take any questions you might have about it.
What are the lot sizes for the duplexes, minimum?
Minimum is gonna be 65 foot width. There'll be a lot of them that'll be more in the 78 to 80 foot width, but the minimum would be 65 foot width. And, the single family homes there are what we've got proposed there is similar to what's been approved at Trails End. That's what we're showing there would be something similar to what Trails End is doing. So in a lot of respects, this is very similar to the Trails End development. And of course, we hope to see the same kind of success. You guys have seen how many rooftops that went up over there. That's one of the goals, is to be able to see where we can stage this out pretty quickly. And we'll do multiple phases, but being able to stage it out pretty quickly is one of the hopes.
Is this currently in the city of Goddard?
No.
Okay. So part of this would be.
There would be an annexation that would be part of it. And one thing I should mention, they're in the due diligence phase of this to make sure that it is really going to work for them to be able to do the project. So they're still in that process of making sure that we can make the project happen.
Does that northwest road tie directly into Arbor Creek?
Yes, it would. And it's kind of interesting, they're using a slightly smaller street size, so we'd have to figure that out as far as the right-of-way size, but our road would match directly into theirs.
What's the intent of that? I mean, is that something,
Arbor
Creek people appreciate that, or?
That's actually Arbor Creek South, but
Yeah, Arbor Creek South.
that's an important distinction,
Okay.
because
Well,
you got a whole different market in Arbor
Okay.
Creek South, shotgun style, slab on grade, single family homes by Liberty versus your $500,000 homes.
But it's still,
regular Arbor
that
Creek.
road still pours to Arbor Creek though, right? That's what he's asking.
Yeah, and I'll just say that
That road will still go into Arbor Creek's
There's the
addition.
south and then
Yeah.
Still connect.
It'll still
So
connect.
I will say, just as a general policy, it's been Sedgwick County policy and most municipal policies to promote interconnectivity for fire access. If you get blockage in other parts of the area by having that connection, if they need to get in a different way, it provides connectivity for safety purposes. And it's really for emergency services is really what that's mostly intended for. Is just, you don't want to end up landlocking a property where if one road gets blocked, you've created a hazardous situation for people. So that's generally the main reason for the connectivity.
Is it mandatory, but based on Sedgwick County Fire? So I'm hearing some concerns about that.
It's not mandatory.
It's a moving target. There used to be a maximum of 30 lots that could be allowed off a single entrance. Sedgwick County recently updated the ordinance to allow 60 on a single entrance. There's a lot of cases where this fellow, you may have heard his name, Jay Russell. He hates having connectivity to other additions. He wants everything to be encapsulated on his own. So he really hates it, and so he fights it aggressively and wins quite a few times. But generally, their stance is it's the preferred way to do it. But as far as a requirement, it's not as much of a requirement as it used to be.
We had a similar situation recently in Goddard where we connected it, but put a gate in there, so it was unlockable by the.
Yeah, they have what's called Knox lock that the fire department uses on those, yeah. And it certainly, if there was a concern about that, these guys aren't gonna care. If we had to gate that off, we wouldn't care about that if we had to, so. We've got plenty of interconnectivity as it stands where we don't need it.
Your single family homes, are those lots big enough for a third garage?
No, those would not.
What about if you brought them all the way to the east and around that cul-de-sac and back?
As far as accommodating 3-car garages
Yes,
part?
a single family home with a large enough lot for.
John, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I would say that concept is really not conducive to 3-car garages typically, would be my comment on that, but.
You know, that, like the gal was saying earlier, you know, we're trying to, you know, the gal was saying earlier, to make it affordable and everything, and the way interest rates are now, with the single family, you know, we'd like to be able to build these to sell them.